Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Learning Guild. And we have another DevLearn 365 webinar for you today. And that is Data Without the Drama, how to consolidate and visualize learning metrics that matter. And with us today, we have Amber Rodbell. She's the VP of Learning Experience at ELB Learning. Amber Rodbell is an accomplished leader in learning and development, currently serving as the VP of Learning Solutions at ELB Learning. With over a decade of experience in instructional design, project management, and innovative learning strategies, Amber has a proven track record of delivering impactful learning solutions to some of the world's most prominent organizations. She excels in leading large global teams and overseeing 100+ projects concurrently with a team of 40+ global instructional designers, developers, and quality assurance professionals. Her approach focuses on operational excellence, fostering collaboration, and enhancing learning outcomes through innovative and learner-centered strategies. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Amber. And Amber, when you're ready, please begin sharing.
All right. Thank you so much. I am going to share here. Let's go into the slideshow.
Right. And we are seeing your slides. Thank you.
Beautiful. Awesome. Let me just minimize this. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for coming today. Today's session, we are going to be talking about moving beyond the activity reporting and learning, how to prove the true business impact of what we're sharing, the training we're doing, or the learning that we're assigning or creating. We're going to explore some different strategies for consolidating data, connecting it to our business KPIs, and creating a very insight-driven ecosystem that your stakeholders and business units can trust. I am going to start here with a quick poll. If we want to put that up here on the screen, I have it in my slideshow, but if you can fill it out here so we can have that data. The question is, which of these best describes your current challenge? Is it that you see that you have data silos? Maybe you have too many platforms that you're trying to connect, or maybe your metrics that you feel are important are really not resonating with your leadership. So we're going to give you a minute or so, and if you can take that poll, and we'll see what the challenges across the board are that we're all kind of facing. All right. Let's see here. Give it a few minutes. This one's always really interesting to me. I feel like I know what the answer is going to be, but we'll see.
All right, so I'll just give it a couple more seconds for the poll as we're approaching 77%. One moment. And okay, I'm going to be closing it in just a few seconds. And here we are, and I'll show you the results.
All right, so it looks like metrics that don't resonate with leadership, which is perfect on what we're going to discuss. The second item is data silos, and lastly, too many platforms. So with that being said, let's jump over to the next slide here, and we are going to jump right in. So there's kind of been a credibility gap in the L&D space because we have been so focused on kind of the activity-based reporting, showing, hey, look how many completions we have, look at the attendance or participation in the training that we were doing, all these training hours logged, course satisfaction scores, that's a big one, and the number of programs that overall as an organization we've delivered. So these are really easy things for us to count and to quantify, but they don't really tell the story or the business impact, and they don't connect then with the metrics that are going to matter. The gap between what is reported and what is required undermines our overall credibility and our team's credibility. So if we take a look at the second column, this column shows, okay, outcome based. And so it's showing productivity changes, time to competency, job performance improvement, sales growth and customer outcomes, employee retention and internal mobility, and your business KPIs, of which all of these can be business KPIs. It demonstrates how our learning and how our training is enabling for the company that you work for the growth, agility, and measurable ROI. And that's kind of how we get that buy-in from leadership, that we're not just showing, hey, completions, attendance, but we're connecting the dots to showing that based on these things, here are our outcomes. All right, moving on. So this is really where what I like to call learning intelligence comes in. So I have an example for you. There's a global sales team that I worked with for a really long time. And every quarter, their L&D reports looked amazing. They had thousands of completions, hundreds of training hours. Their surveys would come back with super high satisfaction scores. But when their leadership would ask, hey, okay, that's great, but how is this helping us sell more? They had a hard time answering that question. So at that point, we kind of began to connect the training data from the LMS with the performance data from their CRM tool. And suddenly we started to see patterns. These patterns would start to emerge. And we saw that reps who completed training ramped up to their quota about 30% faster and closed more deals in their first 6 months than the reps who didn't complete any training and were just kind of like, yeah, we're not doing that. So this was their light bulb moment. Learning was no longer measured by the hours they logged. It was tied directly to the business KPIs. This was kind of a shift from descriptive or activity reporting to then it became very predictive, decision-ready insight reporting. And that's really where we want to get to. That's what we can call learning intelligence in our companies. And that's the consolidating of data and connecting it to our outcomes and proving then the impact that it has as at a business level. And everybody can do that with the data that you have. It's just figuring out how to connect those dots. So what we see is that, like, why is that hard, or why does it seem hard to connect those dots? And that falls under data fluency. Data fluency is really a leadership skill that your L&D department managers, anyone who's reporting up needs to really understand and be able to speak with data fluency. That's one of the biggest challenges. It's not the data exists, it's how we use it. So leaders who can connect the learning insights to productivity, revenue, or talent metrics can gain a seat at that strategy table versus those who can't. They kind of get stuck in that reporting activity. Data fluency has become really the new leadership currency. When you can translate learning into a business language, you can also then start to, because you know the facts, you know the data behind it, you can anticipate some of those questions that your executives are going to start asking you. And you're going to start realizing that, oh, I have those metrics somewhere. I'm so close to this data. I just need to be able to explain it. And that's going to really build that trust with your finance, HR, and your operational leaders. All right. So we really then go from tracking to predicting. And, you know, most of us probably here are stuck at that descriptive level, or you probably wouldn't have attended, or you're just trying to figure out what more you can do. So we have this data. Reports tell us what happened. We know what happened. But what our organizations really need are more predictive insights. So which programs accelerate to time to competency? Which of the programs are showing that metric? Where are skill gaps likely to emerge? What's the impact of learning on performance or retention? Those are the kind of questions, and that's the level where L&D starts to shift from being just, hey, we're a cost center, we're costing the business money, to being a true driver of growth. So that's where we can start saying, okay, we're tracking all this data, and now we're predicting that because of these programs, we were able to have these results. And so we know that's repeatable. So when our business units say, these are the problems that we're having, we can say, okay, well, in the past, we've seen that these types of programs are able to bring your employees up faster, and your sales are going to increase. And we know that because we can predict that from the data we have in the past. Now, let's dive into kind of like, I just want to make sure we all understand what all of this means. So descriptive data tells us what happened. An example of descriptive data is going to be, okay, I have 50 employees who finished onboarding this quarter. And I know that was maybe faster than usual. That's all I know. Diagnostic data can tell us, okay, well, why did that happen? So we know, okay, the employees finished faster, but why was that? It was because we added a mentorship program. And then when we get to predictive data, that tells us, okay, now we can tell you what's going to likely happen next. For example, based on current trends, new hires who take our mentorship track are going to reach full productivity 30% faster. Using data from the past and present to forecast what is likely to happen in the future is our predictive data. And that's where we want to get to. In kind of a L&D context, some of the questions that you also could think about or analyze to ask that would help with this is, okay, based on data, which employees are most at risk of leaving in the next 6 months? And you can start to predict that. Which training program will likely improve sales performance the most? What do we see in the past and what do we see so we can predict the future? How long is it going to take the next group of our new hires to hit their competency? And what did we do in the past that helped us reach that faster? And then we can outline that. So when you hear predictive, you're thinking, okay, we're forecasting for future outcomes from our current data. All right, so let's kind of talk about the systems or why it is that we are not moving our data up to the next level. So disconnected systems kind of drain our credibility because we might dive into, okay, what our LMS is saying, or we might say, okay, we're going to dive into what the CRM is saying, or we might have tons of reports about each. But think about how much time I'm sure we are all spending pooling all of those Excels together from different platforms, pulling the data and stitching them together and trying to make sense of some of these mismatched metrics. By the time our report is ready, the decision window generally has already passed. And so we don't have a moment to sit at the table and say, hey, we already know what this is telling us and we have a strategy so it doesn't happen in the future. So this isn't just like inefficiency, it's kind of lost opportunities for your L&D department to have really the ability to change the future for the business and to really weigh in on those changes. When your data isn't integrated, insights are kind of delayed, our errors, just errors creep in, leaders lose trust in the numbers that we're showing. And if we don't have anything to validate behind them, we're creating like all of this noise instead of clarity or instead of insights. And that does undermine our ability to then influence those strategic decisions that we want to be a part of. So, we're going to jump over here to another poll, but one of the things I want you to also start thinking about is today, how many systems on average are your teams pulling data from? Is it multiple systems? Is it one or two? what does that look like? And then once you pull all that together, how long is that taking you to pull those systems and that data together? And is that a hindrance to you? Start thinking through some of that. And we're going to jump over here to another slide. All right, so imagine that your VP or CEO, whoever it is, asks you today, what impact is the learning that you're creating? What is that having on performance? How quickly do you think today you can really respond with a credible business link data answer? Meaning you have the data to back that answer up. How long do you think that would take you today? That the answer to this question kind of says a lot about whether, we're seen as a partner in strategy or more of a support function or more as a cost center. So it'll be interesting to see what the majority of us feels like, how long that takes us. So
All right. We have about 70%, so I'm going to leave it open for a few more seconds. And you should, Carmelita said, just had to scramble to do this just last week. All right, I've ended the poll and here are our results.
All right, so we have 5% telling us, oh, it takes minutes. So that's great. That's awesome. We have a lot of people saying, okay, 42% it takes days, not ideal, but even worse is 53% of us is saying, hey, it takes us weeks to put all that together, to tell our VPs and to try to get a seat at the table. Because if it's taking us weeks, at least in most businesses, those decisions that have to happen at that level, especially when you're thinking about budgets for the new year or how much we can spend on different programs, those decisions are generally being made really quickly. So by the time it's taken us weeks to get that data together, even if a decision hasn't really been made, there's probably a lot of conversations that have been had and certain perceptions or certain subtle decisions that are not like the final ones, those have been made. And so we then don't have, everybody already has their mind already made up, and we don't have the time to come in and say, oh, wait, here's the data, and let me tell you the story. So if we can get to that point faster, then we can start really sitting there and saying, okay, here's the data. I mean, think about if we could all get that information to our VPs in minutes. Think about what they then could think about and take to other people. So getting that data to the people who matter quickly. So we're going to talk about the metrics that matter. I know everybody has heard that forever. We're going to talk about the critical few. And here's where that focus really comes in, and that focus matters and that speed matters. So there's hundreds of possible metrics. And the trick is let's say your VP doesn't tell you their KPIs or doesn't give you the things to zero in. It's going to be important for you to pick the critical few yourself. That could be performance impact, productivity, time to competency, retention and engagement, all of those things, as well as your business KPIs, or connecting those things to your business KPIs. We want to always make sure we know our business KPIs, what our executives already care about, but come to the table with a few critical items each time so that they know, oh, wow, look at the value that this team is providing. When you can report on these, then you're not just coming to them with tracking learning completion, you're showing the connection to true business performance. And that's the goal, is how is what you're creating showing a business impact? It doesn't matter if 1 million people take your course, if there's no business impact that you can see or you can show, then it's really discounted. And if the business KPIs, if you don't know those, then it's going to be really hard for you to connect the dots. So that's when you have to just focus in on these critical few. Because sometimes if you don't know your business KPIs and your VPs don't really know them or can't articulate them, it means they're not understanding either. So you might need to help them get there. And that's with these kind of metrics that matter. All right. So when you're creating that dashboard for your VP or one pager, let's say, for them, notice on this screen, there are very few metrics. It's very to the point. Any leader can look at this and say, oh, wow, look at that. They immediately understand, time to competency, sales productivity, employee retention. They see it visually. Okay. They don't want to, no one wants to. I don't want to, you don't want to, your leaders don't want to wade through tons of charts in a PowerPoint presentation. They don't want to wade through, 15 Excel sheets. They want 3 to 5 numbers that matter the most. So let's kind of break this down. Time to competency. This really measures how quickly new hires or learners reach their full productivity. So this could be onboarding, this could be sales training, and a 15% improvement here doesn't just save time. It can then, if you think about it further and can paint the picture, tell the story further, it can accelerate revenue. It can reduce onboarding costs. It can shorten the gap between hiring and performance so that, your leaders can decide, okay, we know we need this amount of resources. We know that we have these revenue projections. So how many do we need to get there? So you can help explain that with your numbers. If we look at sales productivity, by linking training data with your CRM data, we can actually show how our learning drives performance. So a 10% lift in productivity can be tied to a sales training program, which is going to make a very, very clear case for your ROI or return on investment. So that's really important. You're linking it, you're showing the value of your organization. Let's look at employee retention. So engagement and growth opportunities are leading drivers of retention. If an employee does not feel engaged, maybe they had a poor onboarding experience, maybe they feel alone or siloed. If they're not engaged, they are less likely to be retained. If we can show that learners who have completed our targeted programs are staying longer, maybe that's mentorship programs, whatever it is, that's a direct line to reducing turnover costs, which is a very big cost in business. So if you can kind of notice what's happening here, each metric is tied to a very specific business outcome. Most executives and your business already care about cost savings, revenue growth, retention, but we have to build that bridge that shows how the learning or training or whatever we're creating ties to that and ties to overall transformation in their business. So when you're creating these dashboards, the design and the mock-ups of your dashboard really do matter. Big numbers, clear trends, and a simple story. Executives, they want to be able to just look at this, glance at it, and instantly know how learning is contributing to their business goals, or how is what you're doing, whatever that campaign is, initiative is, how is that contributing to the overall business goals? Because then they can take that to their leadership. They can paint the picture for others, tell the story to others. Half of what we do in L&D and half of what we do in executive leadership is telling stories to explain what we're doing and whether it's successful or not successful. So I hope everybody can understand the simplicity is what matters. All right, now moving on. Now that we know kind of the metrics we want to measure, the next question is, okay, we probably already knew a little bit of that, but how do we actually get there? So the answer to that question is through architecture and different consolidation strategies. So most of our organizations, they're going to start with 3 or 4 main systems. It could be an LMS, a LXP, your CRM, maybe you have some sort of HR or performance management platform. And really, the trick isn't to like say, okay, tomorrow, everyone, we're going to connect all of these at once so that we have a single source of truth. I mean, that is the goal, but it's really taking it one step at a time. And it's to build really the pathway to where data from each one of these systems flows into one central layer, one central repository. That could be, maybe it's a middleware, maybe it's a data warehouse or a BI tool. From there, you can kind of visualize the story in a very clean dashboard, like we just saw. And even if you have it all in one place and you might have to filter through, you can create a clean dashboard like we just saw from this data. You'll then be able to use that data to create your story. And really, here's the important part. You're going to want to start by picking the 1 or 2 systems where it links to business outcomes and that those business outcomes are the strongest. So maybe by showing your LMS and HRIS tool shows onboarding impact, and your LMS plus your CRM tool really shows what impact you have on sales performance. So you're going to link those. So take 1 or 2 of your tools or 1 of 2 of your outcomes and start building the links to those. Build the bridges. You don't have to do it all at once. It's really taking 1 step at a time and building that. What I like to call this is really your learning data maturity model, okay? Instead of thinking about this kind of, we've all heard of like, okay, you're going to crawl and then you're going to walk and then you're going to run. I like to frame it differently. This is our data maturity model. The maturity model gives us the roadmap to grow into. So we're not saying, hey, this is what we're going to just do it all at once. And we're also not saying, well, we have to, crawl before we can walk, before we can run, but instead we're just showing the full roadmap to our leadership. It's about scaling from a very sophisticated way, step by step by step. At the foundational level, the priority is really connecting systems and establishing a reliable single source of truth. So that's our starting point. And then at the insight-driven level, we're then taking it along our roadmap. We're linking learning to the KPIs that matter most to our business. And that, again, could be productivity, retention, revenue. And if we don't know that those KPIs, that's okay too, because you're going to add those in with your critical few. And you can help paint the story for your leadership. And at that predictive level then that we're trying to get to, we are using advanced analytics to forecast those skill gaps, to predict the impact of our learning programs, and then to be able to then recommend the interventions for our leadership. So we will be able to have those recommendations. And because it didn't take us weeks, it took us minutes and hopefully not days, but maybe a day or 2, we are able to say, okay, this is our roadmap. This is what we're showing. And this is what we're recommending, the interventions to change that behavior or to get better. And by doing so, we're able to have a seat at the table. We're able to have a seat at those strategy meetings because we have the data to back up what we're saying. And we have the data to really say, this is what's going to help our business get better. All right. So let's kind of bring it all together and what you need to really come to the table with your leadership. We've talked about why data fluency matters. We've talked about the cost of having disconnected systems, the critical measures and metrics that you're going to focus on, and even how to structure that ecosystem, how to build your roadmap. But oftentimes we should create, and this is helpful for leadership, a learning intelligence playbook of what we're going to be doing. At a very foundational level, we're going to connect our systems. We're going to build that single source of truth. And that's really what gives us credibility. That's our credibility anchor, let's say. And then at a insight-driven level, we're going to narrow in on the metrics that matter most. So maybe it's time to competency, productivity, retention. And then we're going to link those to the KPIs. And we're going to have that all in our playbook. Then at the predictive level, we're going to bring in analytics. And that's when we're going to really have fun here. And we may use AI to forecast skill gaps and performance outcomes. So you can start acting on things before a problem appears. You're already able to predict that that could be a problem or forecast what that looks like in the future and go ahead and make those recommendations ahead of time. So you start being able to be someone who is relied on in the business to help the business move forward. Then at an impact level, we are consistently showing up to our executives. We are showing how learning drives business growth. And that's what earns our team trust, influence, and more investment into our L&D teams. So your playbook is an intelligence system that powers business decisions, which gives you a strategic seat at the table. You are able to then come to your executives. You're predicting future problems. You're already showing recommendations before these even occur. And that proves your impact on the business. Now, I know this is always the burning question because everybody is all excited about AI. So, and I am too. So how can AI help you? That's probably the number one question we get in our business is how can we use AI to really transform our business or take small steps to use it to transform our teams? And so again, I always suggest, start in your circle of influence, start with your team, start where you can make the most impact. So it all, we all know this all sounds great, but none of us have a bench of learning architects at our disposal, or maybe we do, but they're all really busy. So we don't have the people sitting to help build those dashboards. And that's where AI can come in and help. AI can do 3 really big things for you. So first, it can really ingest and consolidate the data. So AI tools can pull data from your LMS, your CRM tools, and your performance systems automatically. It can be set up to do that. Or if you do have to manually export it, it can be a mechanism that you then upload to and say, okay, now we need to consolidate this. We need to create a single normalized data set. So we're going to use AI and prompt AI to consolidate the data, to look at the data, find metrics that connect in the data. Sometimes that's even prompting our AI to say, okay, here are the metrics I'm looking for. What can you see from this data that's now been consolidated by you to tell that story? And you can use those prompts to do so. Then we can use AI to really analyze and help us predict. So it's not just AI crunches our numbers for us. AI consolidates our numbers for us. Well, take it a step further and prompt your AI tool, whether that's, Copilot, ChatGPT, or I know we use Google products, so we can have all of our data in our Google Drive, and we can use Gemini to prompt it and say, okay, what kind of patterns are we seeing? help me consolidate this, help me recognize patterns, and now let's forecast some of the outcomes that we could have. Let me give you an example. So it can tell you that by looking at the data that you have in the different, maybe different Excel sheets, or maybe in the different systems, if you're able to connect there, it can tell you, okay, employees, it looks like, it'll say something like, it looks like employees who finish a specific program are 20% more likely to hit their quota. Or that they could also say, maybe there's a skill gap because we see that employees who are missing this one piece of the program are less successful. And so that's likely going to be a skill gap that maybe you see right now, but in 6 months is going to be a really big problem because maybe you're planning on onboarding an entirely new sales team. So it can start analyzing that, predicting it, and as you're building your new onboarding trainings, you can start adding in that data, and you can start making sure that your training is covering some of those topics or covering some of those programs that you saw as a very distinctive skill gap. Now, what else can it do? Well, it can also help us visualize, and then it can help us make the recommendations. So there are a lot of AI-powered dashboards that they don't just display metrics. They can, and even if you don't have a dashboard, you can create one with some prompting, and you can say, okay, highlight the anomalies, highlight the trends, and even maybe suggest some actions or recommendations of what we could do. And again, you know, with AI, those recommendations may all not be perfect, but you can say, all right, give me 10 recommendations. And then you yourself can say, oh, wow, I can see how these 3 would really help us. Let me explore that further and really try to see if that would be helpful. You know, maybe there are some that aren't helpful, but that's okay. It gives you that starting point. It gives you a sounding board. So imagine logging in and you see, okay, the sales ramp time dropped 12%. So you can continue an onboarding strategy of X. That's what your AI told you. That moves you from just, oh, I see 1,000 people took this and just reporting to saying, oh, ooh, we need to make a decision here. We need to make a recommendation here because our data and the AI that we've built is suggesting that in 6 months down the road, we're going to have this problem. So really the beauty of using AI is that what it takes you all right now, weeks to create of manual work, exports, cleaning up the data, filtering it. Maybe you're creating some, you know, Excel pivots, dashboards, and you're tweaking it and compressing it. It takes all that away. And in real time, it's compressing it and consolidating it. And it's giving you trusted insights. And really, you might have to play around with prompting for a little bit, but when you know the right words to say and you're asking the right questions, you're going to get data and metrics that matter. So when I'm asked, you know, what kind of tools are out there, what is available with AI, again, we all have the AI tools that our business units have already approved, so you can always start there. And if you don't have any approvals or you're allowed to like start from scratch, you could start with a very learning focused analytical tool, something like a watershed. You could also push consolidated data. Like if you already have the data, you could push it into a BI platform that has AI capabilities that would really help you. Or you could layer on AI features for predictions and decision-ready insights just by layering on extra tools. And that's really a lot of times the approach I like to take is, and I find most businesses like to take, is that maybe we don't have the money to invest in all of these third-party tools. Maybe we do. Maybe we need an overall strategy first, and so we can see where we're even going with that. However, then we use the tools, we identify the tools, and we layer them on. and we layer them, and don't just try one tool. Try a Gemini on your Google Drive, then layer that into maybe a Chat GPT. Because once you have the AI transformation initiative in place, it becomes really easy to start that layering. All right. Now, so we've covered a lot of different things, and I want to make sure that we get to some Q&A and things like that. So we've talked about learning intelligence. We've kind of exposed some of the hidden costs of data silos that actually ends up being a cost to us to have those silos. So if ever you need to kind of encourage your leadership that, hey, we need to make an investment into these things, you can say, hey, there are hidden costs in data silos. We've identified that we really need to know the metrics that matter. We need to ask our leadership for the right KPIs. And if they don't know them, that's okay. We need to help them get there and really focus on several that we know will have impact. That keeps us out of that drama zone. We kind of looked at how having an architect and consolidation strategy can connect an ecosystem and really can help you create that roadmap, which is really important to start with, having a roadmap. And it's also really important then to have a playbook for your team so that everybody starts speaking the same language. Everybody has the same goals. Everybody is really trying to get to data that produces outcome, data that produces insights so that you can have data that can help you make recommendations before it's even asked. So our call to action today really is, don't let your data stay in the drama zone where you're just looking at it, you're seeing numbers and you don't know what to do with them. And when people ask you about them, you're just like, I don't even know. I don't know. What do you want me to say? Don't stay there. So start small in your teams at a team level, or if you have the influence on a global level, still start small. Pick one system that you can start consolidating data from. Pick one metric that matters. Build it from there. Start layering those initiatives. If you need help with your AI initiatives, you can give us a call. We do AI transformation. We have strategists that can help you with that. If you want to take a deeper dive into this later, we're going to send out the deck and you can review it. A lot of the words and the framework in here you can use to prompt your AI to get the results that you need. So use the deck, if nothing else, for that, to start prompting your AI. And really the opportunity here is really clear. With the right approach and with the power of AI and with consolidating data and knowing what your goal is, your learning and development teams can move beyond counting completions. We can become a true driver of business growth and not be seen as an expense, because I know none of us wants to be seen that way. We want to be able to really help strategize with our leaders and really drive growth. So that's the end of the presentation. So if there's any Q&A or anything out there that I can address now.
Yes, there are a number of questions, Amber.
Okay.
So we're going to start at the top. And one of the first questions, can you really connect learning engagement to outcomes? Is there a true correlation? How can you do that is the question at hand.
Okay. Well, I think that with learning engagement, we can really say, okay, depending on the topic, let's pick a topic and we can say, okay, we had so many people take this course. You can show, what I've done in the past is I've shown kind of a course that is just like, and I'm going to use this example, but don't hate on me because I like Rise, but let's just say you have a Rise course and you're scrolling through and you're reading it, or maybe you're not reading it because you're just scrolling. and you can see completions, and then you can see, oh, behavior's not changing. I don't know why. And then perhaps your team then instead creates a course that maybe it's gamified, or maybe it is scenario based. So it puts your learner inside of the course and it engages them and it makes them care about the subject that they're learning about. You can't invalidate that, because when somebody cares and someone's engaged, you see that their behavior changes. And that's the whole point of what we do here, is that when you engage a learner, they care. They want to change their behavior. They see why it matters. If you're just scrolling through Rise, and there's some training that's an appropriate platform to use, but if we're just scrolling through and there's no engagement, why would I want to change my behavior? Why would you want to change your behavior? So I think you can quantify engagement, because even if you have to create two different types as a prototype or an example, sometimes people have to see the data. They have to see that, okay, we're creating two courses, we're going to do a case study, and we're going to see what behaviors change. And based on that, now we can show you that engagement matters. And then we can say, hey, this is validation on why we want to create these types of courses versus these types of courses. Does that answer your question?
I hope that answers the question, but there is a sort of another question in regards to the that piece of it. So how do you isolate other factors or variables that might actually impact long-term business outcome, like employee retention, from learning impact? How do you handle that?
So isolating the data. So again, that is really where, depending on what type of data you're getting, really does matter. So if I have, a LMS that I can collect, even question level data, so I know what people are getting right or wrong, I can see responses, I can see what people are typing in there. That kind of data is so much more valuable than just completions and things like that. So the type of data is very important too. I do want to call that out, because it is harder to isolate when you're not able to deep dive into it. When you're able to have an LMS or an LRS that gets into the insights of what people are selecting, what decisions are being made, that's when you can start isolating trends and isolating those different kinds of factors. Now, are we going to be able to say, well, because of we might be able to, our onboarding experience, we know we had 50 people go through our experience, and at the end of it, we had a 10% retention rate. Okay, well, maybe that's because we have a terrible work environment. I don't know. But maybe it's because our training didn't set them up for success, or it didn't set expectations. As human beings, we all know that the biggest issue in life that we have is unmet expectations. So therefore, if our onboarding training can set the proper expectations, if we are asking post-survey questions, things like that, and then we're analyzing that data, we're able to make those types of connections that prove and isolate different items. So I hear what you're saying. It is hard with just completions and things like that. It is much easier. The more data we have, the better that story becomes. So maybe step one in your organization is that we change our LMS so that we can get, we can use SCORM 2004 so we can analyze at a question level, or that we can use XAPI with an LRS so we can really dive in. Maybe that's the first small step for your organization that you can take and have validation to create a better data story.
All right, I hope that answered that person's question. Now I have a couple questions here around competencies and completion and how you're measuring competency as you present it. And then there was another question. What happens if your company does not have clear competency markers? You talked about the expectations, which probably could be linked to the competencies, I would believe, is this is your expectation, this is the competency with it. So how do we help people if they don't have clear competency markers, and how are you measuring that competency?
So I would have to say if you don't know what you're trying to measure and you don't know what success looks like, then likely neither does your employee. So taking it a lot of times, one thing that I don't think a good use case for AI always is creating training from scratch, because then you lose that ability to measure competency. So it's very easy when you have a job that you can clearly say, okay, here's how you do it. Now let me see if you know how to do it, and I'm going to measure that. It's a little bit harder when it's something that is harder to measure. However, building in those competencies and expectations into all of your training is crucial. Because not only is it crucial for the training, it's crucial for you to be able to then explain to your leadership what you're trying to do and to then measure it. So honestly, if you have training that doesn't have clear competency or links to competency, then the training is probably not that important to do. So first step there, to take a small step, would be, okay, I need to take a look at all of my training programs and work with my organizations, each organization or business unit in my organization, and say, okay, here's the question, why are we doing this? What are you doing with this training? What are you trying to do? What are the behaviors that you're trying to change? Again, understanding the reason behind, because that is what gets us to be able to have the ability to create data and to have data that we can then measure. So that is very, very important. It could be that you think that you don't know what competency you're trying to get to, but if you look at it, research it, talk to the owners of that content, maybe they can give you a paragraph or why it's important to them. And once you have that, you can then take your data, use AI, say, this is why it's really important to this business unit. Look at this data and look at, our completion rates, or look at the fact that, we have people retrying the questions 5 times before they get them right, or, whatever that is, and tell me the story. And I always say, when you're using AI, don't just ask it to tell you one story. Say, tell me several stories of why this could be happening, or based on what this person is trying to achieve, are we going to achieve it with this when we see the behavior of the people taking this training? Because another metric that you can see is, it's not just that your team member, and even in simple LMSs, you can see your completion, and maybe everybody gets 100%. Okay, that's hard to measure because everybody got 100%. But maybe it's that, I'm not just going to look at the completion. I'm going to look at how long the learner was spending on this. Were they just clicking through and answering the questions, or were they trying to learn something? Were they spending time on this? And then maybe your metric is the time it took them, or the time that they should have took them and it didn't. So you can measure with all of those different data sets.
All right. I think that probably answers it. I hope. If it doesn't, just ask another question. Maybe we'll get to it. There's a couple more questions that I want to get to. This person, Jackie, says she appreciates how learning how AI can help, but how do you adjust If your industry is incredibly risk averse and putting data into AI tools is a big concern. I kind of think this is outside the scope of our talk, but is there anything you can offer this person?
Well, I do understand that a lot of organizations are still a little behind on AI initiatives. However, one, they're going to have to get up to speed quick because there's just going to be a necessary thing. So when you think about that, you can encourage your leadership to maybe approve an LLM that is at an enterprise level so that you're not putting your data out there for all the world to see. It's private, it's on your own server. It's something that only your internal teams can utilize so that you're able to utilize it and see that data and help your ways of working. If you can provide justification to your leadership on the why, I think that becomes really important. And really, that's why when we come in and we do different AI transformation workshops, it helps you create that roadmap or playbook for your leadership so they can see, oh, it's actually costing us money, or it's actually hurting us to not invest in an AI system that is proprietary and that is not risk adverse. So otherwise, like if we take the AI component out of it, let's take that out of it. Even in our, Microsoft tools, there are built-in AI tools now. And I don't know if your companies can stop those, but if they can, then you can, try to create, well, I can say this, you can privately on your own time, go to ChatGPT and say, hey, how can I create faster pivot tables? How can I use Excel in a better way? How can I create data faster? What are some tips and tricks? So maybe it's then upskilling yourself in the tools that are available to you.
All right, we have several more questions, but the final question I'm going to ask you is, this person, their company doesn't have an LMS. They're just finding out that outside customer service and sales, they're mostly not tracking any metrics like retention, time to competency, or anything else. In your opinion, what's the most impactful metric you could bring to leadership early on?
And did you say a sales company?
It doesn't tell me what kind of company, but they're saying that outside of customer service and sales, they're really not tracking anything. They're only tracking certain things. So like in learning development, basically.
Yeah. Okay. So I would say retention is a huge factor because that is a big cost to your company. Every time you have employee turnover, you have to ramp up someone new. Every time that you're spending all that money on the onboarding process and just the money to retain a new employee. So I would say retention is huge. And honestly, I always really care about, the next one I care about is your employee satisfaction with their job, which also plays into retention. So those items, I think in general, if your people are happy, you're going to see good results. So if your people are not happy, you tend to not see good results. So I would say definitely retention for me is one of the biggest items to focus in on.
That's a great answer. And that is really the top of the pyramid, isn't it, for the metrics? If you don't have the people, you're not going to be able to get the work done. So you need to have retention there. Thank you so much, Amber, for this thought-provoking session. There have been a lot of people who've mentioned that, and it's got a lot of brains going as to how to do this. Thank you so much. And thanks to ELB Learning, who sponsored this session today. And we'd like to thank them for sponsoring the session. And lastly, thanks to you. You have great questions in there, and hopefully some of them will get answered later on. And if you would like to learn more, you can go to elblearning.com, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.